Hello everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Tea Time with Me book tag. So this tag was originally created by Olivia Savannah over at Olivia's Catastrophe, and I was tagged by Victoria from What Victoria Read a couple of months ago to do the tag. I will link both of their channels in the description below, along with anyone else that I mention. Particularly at the end, I will be tagging some people, so I will link their channels. Please go ahead and check everyone that I mention out and subscribe because they're all amazing people. Excuse me if occasionally you'll hear gusts of wind. It's really quite windy today, so yeah, that'll be in the background. As it is a tag based on tea, I am drinking a cup of tea at the moment. I have Earl Grey tea today. Still quite hot. So this is actually something that Olivia based on a particular brand of tea called Puka or Pucka. I'm not 100% sure whether we get that in Australia, but what I'm drinking today is T2. That is a specific tea shop that is all over Australia. It has franchises all over Australia. They do absolutely delicious teas. I really love T2, and you can get all sorts of different blends and all sorts of different teas. So I haven't personally tasted a lot of the teas that Olivia is referencing in this tag, but they all sound pretty great. But today I'm drinking an Australian branded tea, I guess. I mean, it's not an Australian tea because, you know, it's Earl Grey, and also it's, yeah, tea is just not Australian, but it's a company in Australia, so there you go. Alright, so let's get on with the tag. I normally would have planned all of my answers in advance, but I haven't done so today, so I'm going to be a little bit on the fly. I almost didn't film a video today. I'm feeling really tired and not super well. Like, I don't feel sick, I just feel kind of run down. And I was going to film my monthly wrap up, but that's going to be a long video to film, and I was like, oh, can't be bothered. And then I remembered that I had this tag that I was tagged in a while ago, and so I watched Victoria's version, I watched Olivia Savannah's original version, and I watched Abby Appelenor's version to get inspired. So anyway, the point being that we're a little bit on the cuff today. The first prompt is based on the tea Mint Refresh, and the prompt says, a book that does something refreshing. Okay, a book that does something refreshing. So I've decided to go with The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This is a Second World War story, and we follow a young girl in Germany who is sent to live with a family, and it is about the war in Germany and about how it affects their lives and how it affects the Jewish population of this town and just the people in the town. Now, that doesn't sound like anything in particular that is refreshing, because it's certainly not a new topic for a lot of different historical fiction books. But what is quite refreshing about this book is that the narrator is actually Death. So Death comes across Liesl, who is our main character, when she's very young, and she is very sick and her brother is very sick, and he kind of follows her life because he's fascinated by her because she manages to escape him, essentially. And so he's fascinated by her, so Death follows her life, and so he's the narrator. And I thought that was quite a refreshing way of doing things, refreshing way of telling stories. If you can hear that noise that just happened, that I believe is Peanut having some zoomies. Anyway, so yeah, it's a refreshing way of telling a story. I think it was really well done. I really enjoyed this book and I highly recommend. So that is my first book for my first question. Alright, then we have prompt number 2 is based on the tea called Revitalize, and the actual prompt says, a book you need to pay attention to understand it. So I feel like there are a lot of kind of high epic fantasies that I could have picked for this question. I read quite a lot of high epic kind of fantasies, and they do require you to be, you know, kind of paying attention, just because there's so much world building and there's so much information that you need to take in order to know who's doing what where. But the book that I've decided to go with for this one is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This is actually the prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, and it is a high epic fantasy. And there's just so much in this book. There's so many characters, there's so many different parts of the world, there's so much, just so much going on. There's so much history, there's so much action, there's so many different threads woven into this overarching story, and it's just, yeah, because of how much is going on and how many characters you follow, I feel like you really need to be paying attention to what is happening. You really need to be on the ball, you need to be awake, you need to be aware of what's happening. I would definitely recommend reading it if you enjoy fantasy. It is fantastically written, it is so well constructed, it's so well put together. I love Samantha Shannon's scope and scale, I love her writing style, I loved the characters, just I thought it was beautiful, and definitely highly recommend. Definitely something you need to be paying attention to as well. Okay, next one we have Blackcurrant Beauty, a book rich in writing. So I feel like there are, again, any number of books I could have picked for this book. Question. However, what I decided to go with is actually the exact same one that Victoria went with when she did this tag. But I can't help it because I completely agree with her, and that is Chocolat by Joanne Harris. I love Joanne Harris's writing style. I think she has such an incredible way of weaving stories together, such a beautiful way of writing. It's almost, I feel it's quite lyrical, but it's not super purple. Now, another author who I love, whose writing style I love, is Laini Taylor. But I feel like Laini Taylor is very purple, very verbose, very lyrical, very, like, just lots going on. And I love that, but it's not necessarily as approachable, whereas Joanne Harris, while I feel like is very rich and very lyrical in her writing style, it is not so very verbose that it's hard to access, particularly if that's not the kind of writing style that you are used to. Chocolat is probably her most well-known book, and it's the favourite of the books that I've read of hers. Is my favourite. It is actually the first in a series, although I don't even know if I've read the other. I'm pretty sure I have. But I've read Chocolat a number of times. You can definitely read it as a standalone. And you probably know the story because if you've not read it, you potentially will have seen or heard of the movie, which was made in the 90s, starring Johnny Depp. Yeah, beautiful movie as well. But anyway, we follow a woman called Vianne and her young daughter Anouk, and they travel into this new town in France during Lent, and they set up a chocolate shop, and it's about them trying to fit into this town when they've chosen to set up a chocolate shop during Lent. So there's a lot of controversy around that. The local priest isn't very happy with the situation. He's very against her, and he kind of goes on a bit of a warpath against her and her chocolate shop, but she just has this beautiful way with people, and she is able to get really close to people and bring out the best in people, both through her personality but also through her chocolate. This is the kind of book that you will definitely want to read with a lovely cup of tea, or more than likely a hot chocolate, or just plain chocolate, because even though if you went down the road and bought yourself a block of chocolate, it would never match up to the descriptions of the amazing chocolate she makes. It's still chocolate, if you know what I mean. But yeah, this is one of my favourite books of all time. Absolutely love the writing style, love Joanne Harris's way with words, and highly recommend. If those are the sorts of things that you enjoy. There is a little bit of magic in there, and it's just wonderful. The next tea is Winter Warmer, and the prompt is a book that's perfect for winter. Now, I personally am not a seasonal reader. I'm not 100% sure why I'm not a seasonal reader. I suspect it's because I am in the opposite season to where most of the publishing happens. So the big five in particular publishing houses are based in the Northern Hemisphere. And so all of their like winter releases are in our summer. So I just have never been a like seasonal reader. So this is a bit of a tricky one for me, but on the basis that the tea itself is called Winter Warmer, I think the idea is a book that's perfect for winter in that it will warm you up, make you feel comforted, a book that you can, you know, sit by the fire and read and drink a lovely cup of Winter Warmer, and while there's potentially snow outside and all of those sorts of things. Which makes me feel like I should go with a book that is set during winter. But I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to choose a book that I actually read during winter myself. Now, I didn't pick this up because, like I said, I don't read seasonally, so I didn't pick this up because it's a winter book, but I think that it would work as a winter book. It's kind of got those it's not a dark academia book, but it's got those sorts of vibes, gothic kind of vibes, and some of it is set, a very small amount, but still some of it is set in Antarctica, and so there's obviously wintry vibes there. The book I'm talking about is Inkblood SisterScribe by Emma Tors. Like I said, it's not dark academia, but it has those sorts of vibes, has that kind of gothic feel to it, and it's also very magical. So we follow two sisters. Again, now we have Peanut scratching the couch. Peanut. So we have two sisters who grew up in this very kind of magical family, and the father collected these magical books throughout all of their lives, and they have this library in their house, and one of them has the ability to use the books and one of them doesn't. We start out with one of them being in Antarctica doing work and the other one is at home looking after the books, and then various things start to happen, and suddenly the one that's in Antarctica finds that she has to go home, and a lot of different things are revealed about their past, about their family, and about the books themselves, and what actually is magic and how the books are actually created. I thought it was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I definitely feel like it has those sorts of gothic, dark academia, magic vibes that people seem to associate quite strongly with winter or autumn, but also because some of it does take place in a winter setting, in that there's North America and England, and I think there's a lot of, like, it's happening in winter during, there's snow anyway in a bit of it in when they are in North America, but then also they're in Antarctica as well, so it may not be winter in Antarctica at the time, but there is snowy. Okay, and then we have the prompt, lemon, ginger, and manuka honey, and the actual prompt is an old favourite that brings you comfort. So this will not be even remotely surprising to anyone that has been around for any length of time on my channel. The book that I've chosen for this prompt is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. You can just see the bottom of my beautiful Puffin in Bloom copy that is just behind me here. This is a favourite book of mine that I have loved since I was about 10 years old. It is a classic, a children's classic. It is set in Prince Edward Island in Canada, and we follow a young orphan girl called Anne Shirley, and I think she's about 11 when the book opens. She is sent by an orphanage to a brother and sister on Prince Edward Island to be adopted, well, fostered by them. But when she gets there, they say they didn't want her. They wanted a boy to help on the farm, and they have now been given Anne, and it's a great big mistake. But for various different reasons, she ends up staying with them, and it's about them coming together and building a family out of this situation. And we follow Anne on all of her various escapades. Anne is a very precocious, very imaginative, very talkative, very verbose individual, and she kind of doesn't entirely suit Matthew and Marilla, who are the brother and sister, who are very kind of straight-laced, particularly Marilla, but there's something about Anne that they need, and there's something about them that Anne needs, and it's just about her growing up from the age of 11 up until, I think, 18, or maybe, no, I think it's more like 16 or 17 is how old Anne is when the book finishes, but then there's a series that follows her life, and it's just beautiful. I love the writing style. I love Anne as a character. She's one of my favourite characters in literature ever. I just love, yeah, everything about it. There is very small hints of some things that happened to Anne when she was prior to coming to Green Gables, prior to the book opening, as an orphan and as a girl who was moved around different foster homes. This is at a time when it was perfectly normal to, like, use orphans as kind of slave labor. So you would get an orphan in to help with the kids kind of thing, and they, you know, you'd look after them and feed them, but they weren't part of your family. They weren't adopted and become your children. They were the help kind of thing. So that's the kind of way that Anne was used when she was younger, and that's sort of what the plan was when she, well, that was what the plan was when she arrived, except she was a girl instead of a boy. And so because of the time, she can't, I mean, she does end up doing some help with stuff on the farm, but she's not the farm help. So she ends up kind of helping Marilla out, but it's just about them building this family out of this situation, and I loved it. I love it. It's just such a beautiful book. It's one of my favorite books, like I said, of all time. So definitely an old favorite, and definitely brings me comfort. The next tea is Ginseng Matcha. The prompt says, a book full of things you don't usually like, but you loved anyway. All right, I need to have a bit of a think about this one. Bear with me. So I have had a bit of a think, and I've decided to go with Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So the reason I've picked this book is because it's a dystopian sci-fi. Now, I do read dystopian books, but they're not like my most read genre. It's not something I tend to go towards that much, although I've been getting a bit more into sci-fi in general, but also dystopia as a kind of sub-genre of sci-fi recently. But yeah, dystopian sci-fi isn't my usual kind of cup of tea. This is more of a, I would say, kind of literary dystopian sci-fi. And it blends a bunch of different things together that normally I wouldn't necessarily be super interested in. So it's got the post-apocalyptic dystopian world. It has, well, it has a traveling Shakespeare troupe, which I wouldn't say was not my cup of tea, because certainly if it appears in fantasy, that's the kind of thing that I'm quite happy to read about. But it's not like it's not a buzzword for me, if that makes sense. But the main thing is that it deals with a pandemic that wipes out, like, I don't know, half of the world population, changes everything about the world and the way that we live and the way that we deal with environment and all of those sorts of things. And I'm not sure when it came out, but I read it probably I read it in like 2022, I think. So it wasn't in the very midst of everything that was happening in COVID. It certainly wasn't the beginning of COVID, or it wasn't during our lockdown or anything like that. But it was still, COVID was something that we were dealing with. We were still grappling with how to manage. So it certainly wasn't something that we were, I mean, we still have COVID. People seem to not want to talk about it anymore, and it seems to be like people acting like, I'm not everyone, but like it's kind of ignored in a way that implies that it's done, but it's not done. But, you know, anyway, I read it at the time when we weren't there. We were still in COVID world, and we still kind of were acknowledging COVID, and we were still trying to grapple with COVID. And honestly, if COVID is something that is still a trigger for you, if those experiences are still a trigger for you, I would not read this book, because I actually read it after I had COVID. And the way that I felt when I had COVID was how they describe some of the characters feeling when they have this illness. So yeah, it was a lot. But I loved it. I thought it was incredibly well written. I loved just loved the way that everything was explored, loved the way that the new world was explored, and I thought it was fantastic, and I highly recommend if those are the sorts of things that you would enjoy. Like I said, very definite trigger warning for the pandemic that we've experienced, but if that's something that you can handle, then I would highly recommend. But yeah, I think it was mostly the COVID-ness of the illness that really made me feel like, don't know about this book. But I read it and loved it. Okay, next question, or next tea. 3 Cinnamon, a heartwarming book. So obviously for this one, I could go for Anne of Green Gables. I find it incredibly heartwarming. I love Anne as a character. Or I could go for Chocolat, because that is also a book that I absolutely love, that I find incredibly heartwarming. Okay, so the book that I'm going to pick is The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. So this is I feel like it is shelved as romance, but personally I don't think that it is just a straightforward romance. So it is a contemporary book that has a romance plot in it, but there's also more kind of just general fiction vibes as well. And it's heartwarming because, to me, because I love it. I think it's incredibly well written. I love the characters. I love their relationship. I love how they get together. I love how they develop their bond, and I just thought it was beautifully well done. So it's a funny setup. We have Tiffy, who breaking up with her boyfriend and has to move out, and then we have Leon, and Leon basically just wants a flatmate, but he doesn't have space in his flat for a flatmate, but also he doesn't really want to live with anyone. So he puts up an ad saying, essentially, you will share my flat and my bed and everything, but I work nights, so I'll be there during the day. If you work the day, then you won't be there, and then we'll kind of have the flat in shifts, essentially. And so a bit of an odd setup, but it works for both of them at the time, and Tiffy ends up finding this ad and deciding to go for it, and then she starts writing post-it notes to Leon, and then they develop this friendship, and eventually it turns into a romance through these post-it notes, and it's just beautiful. There are some trigger warnings because some of the things that Tiffy has gone through with her partner are quite full on. So definitely have a look at trigger warnings for that one, but I think it was handled incredibly well, and I just really enjoyed this book, and I find it very, very heartwarming to read. Okay, the next tea is Original Chai, and the prompt says a retelling recommendation. So again, no one will be surprised when I recommend Electra by Jennifer Saint. I have read 2 out of the 4 retellings that Jennifer Saint has released. I have all 4 of them. I need to read the other 2. And I have thoroughly enjoyed the 2 that I have read, and I anticipate thoroughly enjoying the other 2. So Jennifer Saint writes Greek mythology retellings, and the 2 that I've read are Ariadne and Electra. Ariadne is the story of Ariadne of Crete and the Minotaur and Theseus, and Electra is the story of a few different female characters involved in the Trojan War, and I love them both, but Electra is my favourite. But basically, Jennifer Saint, as an author of Greek mythology retellings, if Greek mythology is the kind of thing that you enjoy in your retellings, I would highly recommend. I think that she is a very intelligent writer. I think that she does a really fantastic job of writing interesting stories that look at these women and their role in the original myth, and some of their backstory and some of the reasons why they are the way they are and they do what they do in a feminist light without being overbearing, and just really well written and really fun to follow. So I highly recommend both Ariadne and Electra, and Hera and Atalanta, even though I haven't read either of those 2 yet. Jennifer Saint, just in general as an author, I think that she's a fantastic author. I think she really gets to the crux of those women's stories, but is still able to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very, just adheres to the original myth, if that makes sense. Sorry about the light. I just realised that it's starting to get darker because it's now, what time is it? It is now almost 5 o'clock, so it's just starting to get darker, but we are nearly done, so I'll just quickly go through the rest. Okay, so the next tea is chamomile, vanilla and manuka honey, and the prompt says a book that is so soothing you can sleep easily after reading it. So for this one I had to go for another childhood favourite of mine, and that is The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm specifically choosing these books because I actually sometimes use audiobooks, particularly ones that I know really, really well, so I don't have to pay attention to very much, in order to go to sleep, which I realise is part of the problem when it comes to me listening to audiobooks, but that's not the point. And I've listened to Lord of the Rings in order to go to sleep. I listened to the ones narrated by Andy Serkis, which were really great, what I heard of them. But yeah, I just love these books. I think they are so heartwarming and so just like a big giant hug. I think that's because I grew up with my parents reading these books to me, so they have that family feeling to me, although that does also make sense with the type of books they are, because there is a big element of found family within the stories, particularly between the 4 hobbits, but in general through the fellowship that's created for their quest. So if you don't know anything about Lord of the Rings or Hobbit, I don't really know what to say. It is high fantasy. In The Hobbit we follow Bilbo Baggins, who kind of gets swept up in this adventure that he really wasn't looking for but turns out really needed. And then Lord of the Rings is an epic story about a hobbit, Frodo, who is related to Bilbo, who goes on this quest in order to save the world, essentially. But it's just beautifully written. The characters are fantastic. They're so well done. The world building is incredible and highly recommend. Love these series. And yeah, definitely books that will put me that go to sleep easily, partly because I love them and I know them really, really well, partly because they're just so rich with the world building and the way that they're written, and partly because I actually literally did that. Alright, the final tea is 3-Fennel, and the prompt for that says, a book that's good for you even if you didn't wholeheartedly love it. The book that I've chosen is White Rage. I cannot remember who the author is, but it will be on screen. This is a book essentially about racism and about the way that white people, white culture, white society, don't know how to describe it, kind of about, well, white rage. It's kind of about how we will, oh, but I'm not racist because I have a friend who is black. We will try to not own our own inherent racism that we've been brought up in, because the world is inherently racist and our society is inherently racist, and even if we are trying our best not to be racist, even if we are trying our best to be enlightened or woke, there are still things in our society that we just don't, that are perpetuated, that we just don't necessarily know. And so a way that racism is perpetuated is through white rage and through this idea that we use that excuse of like, oh, but I'm not like that because, you know, I went to the rally for Black Lives Matter. I'm not like that because I watch people of colour on the internet. I'm not like that because I read books by people of colour. Whatever it might be, my best friend is black, you know, whatever it might be. And we kind of get like insulted at the very idea that we need to change anything about the way we live or who we are or how we view things, and that because something is not like, because it's inherent, we weren't consciously aware of it, so therefore it doesn't count somehow as racism. Or the idea that like we can still be racist even if we're trying really hard not to be, and that we are offended by that, and our offense is the thing that stops us from growing and learning and actually from society from becoming less racist. I mean, obviously there's a lot more going on than just that, but that's what the book is about. I know that it was a little bit controversial when I read it because it is written by a white woman, and so the controversy is around like, is this something that a white woman really has any place writing about? But personally I found it incredibly, very difficult to read. It's definitely something I felt was good for me, but something that I definitely did not, I wouldn't say enjoyed it. And I think because of those moments where you're kind of confronted with things that you, like your implicit bias that you don't necessarily even, you're not aware of, you have to be confronted with. And just knowing that that you have implicit biases that you maybe didn't think you even have, can be very confronting, but definitely worth a read, I personally think, and definitely something that I think was very good for me, even if I didn't entirely love it. Okay, so that's it for all of the teas and all of the prompts specific to the tag. The next part of the tag is to tag some people. So I had a look at who Victoria tagged, at who Olivia tagged, and at who Abby tagged, and I'm going to try and tag people who were not mentioned by those 3 people. I'm sure other people have done this video before, and potentially I'm going to tag people that have already been tagged anyway, but I'm going to tag a bunch of my Australian friends because for the most part there were no Australian booktubers tagged that I saw. So I'm going to tag Paige from Pages with Paige. I'm going to tag Crystal from Bond Book Reviews. I'm going to tag Meredith from Bin Chicken Books. I'm going to tag Sash from Sasha Reads. Sorry, Sash, I just had a moment of blankness. Is that the name of your channel? It's Sash Reads, I apologise. Sasha from Sash Reads. I'm going to tag Ren from the Reading Ren, and I'm going to tag Liv from What Is Wrong With Me Today? Endless Pages. So all those people are now tagged. I would highly recommend again that you go and check them all out. They're all fantastic and I thoroughly enjoy their content and they're great friends of mine. So yeah, go and check them all out. Go and subscribe, all that good thing. Go subscribe to Victoria, Olivia Savannah and Abby Pellinor. And yeah, that's it from me today. Let me know in the comments below if you like tea. Let me know what answers you would have given for the questions. Let me know what your favourite tea is. And if you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me a cup of tea emoji. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you next time.